Today on LA Currents, it's one of LA Rec and Park's fastest growing programs. It was launched by two persistent city employees who saw the need for safe space for girl talk. Next, he may have been born in Brooklyn, but he has served the 3rd District of City Council of Los Angeles for more than 7 years. But first, women have been working successfully as career firefighters and officers for more than 25 years. It's competitive and tough. But so is LA's first female fire marshal. Let's get to know LAFD's Chief Kristin Crowley. I'm delighted to be joined by LAFD Deputy Chief Kristin Crowley. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
You are the first woman fire marshal for the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. What does that say to other young women?
I think that really says sky's the limit, honestly. If you work hard and you set yourself up for success, try to find some mentors out there, but really be thoughtful and strategic in how you approach your career, really the sky's the limit.
One would think that, given everything that you've done and the time period that you've done it, you've had to go through some challenges and hurdles. So what have you faced and how did you face it?
There's always challenges. I think there's challenges for women and men, especially in the fire service. It's a very unique environment. A lot of it lands on whether or not you are capable of doing the job, you have the credibility and the character to do the job. So for me to kind of set myself up for success, but also just to kind of lead the way for men and women on the job, it was like I wanted to make sure that I was literally comfortable in my skin before I moved on. But I also kind of set myself up for, once I'm comfortable and I feel like, okay, I understand the job, I can make good decisions, it's time to move. Each step, I wanted to learn a different area of the department so that, again, I could make really good decisions as I moved up the chain of command.
I am going to ask, and it's going to become tiresome, but it's a mantle you're going to have to wear, of being a woman in these first positions. Are you hoping that it'll get to the point in which that isn't even a subject anymore?
I think that's where we want to be in the future, but our reality is a reality, meaning, okay, I'm the first woman in this position, and then you get in the position of like, okay, this is what she brings, this is what this person brings to the table, this is the skill set, the qualifications, the experience that they're bringing. Through my entire career, there's been a lot of firsts in just other positions or just the first at this particular station that might have been the toughest truck house in the city. So I'm used to it at this point, but you're absolutely right, you're spot on. We as a community want to get to the point where you look at the person for their skill set and what they're bringing to the table, not necessarily about their gender.
How difficult is the whole city of Los Angeles when it comes to fire?
It's very challenging.
Yes.
You look across the 465 square miles within the city and like all the layers, whether it's brush, whether it's down on the harbor, whether it's a high-rise fire, a big commercial fire, and you look at the LAFD, 106 fire stations, 3,500 plus firefighters, and we train every single day to be able to respond when you call 911, whether it's a medical emergency or a fire incident or a brush fire or just a simple public assist to help an elderly person back into bed. We're prepared to address any need of the community, and that's something I think for our organization to be proud of. It's something for us to be proud of our firefighters. I think we really each and every day strive to provide the best service possible to the city. It's really amazing what our people are able to do, 1,500 calls a day in addition to close to 600 transports a day with people who go to the hospital. So we do that every single day on top of responding to perhaps brush fires inside the city or outside of the city. And then we're still showing up at every single call and doing a great job.
The pandemic brought a whole new set of rules, a whole new set of problems, a whole new set of needs. Where did you fit into that puzzle?
Sure, yeah. We're literally sitting here talking about a pandemic in our lifetime. I oftentimes just really reflect back on that, and here we are living it. So in regard to how we responded, again, couldn't be prouder of our organization. We were able to pivot, and that's what I think is really fantastic about what the fire department is able to do. We have our primary mission each and every day, and we respond to those calls just time after time after time and provide that optimal service. But then when we're called upon for a different mission, we're so mission driven that you need us to do what? Okay, boom. And we put together a plan, we follow up with a plan, and then we're off and running. So you talk about the pandemic, well, it literally within even the fire department, we created and had to come up with a testing plan immediately. So nobody really knew, like, well, how do we test and how are we going to set that up? Where in the city? We had fire inspectors, we had special duty members, we had on and off duty firefighters in all different ranks staffing these testing sites all over the city. And then it came to vaccinations. We pivoted again, came up with a vaccination plan. We've vaccinated over, I don't know the exact number, I think it's about 1.5 million people within the city, and we're still on that mission, and we're still running 1,500 calls, transporting 600 patients to the hospital, and doing all this other missions.
You mentor.
Yeah.
You're part of a lot of mentorship programs. So what is the draw for that?
You got to pay it back. You know, I've had men mentors, I've had women mentors, not a lot of women, but I have had some guidance throughout my career. Now that I'm in this position, it motivates me even more. It's just reach out. It's just getting people comfortable. It's like the higher up you get, the less they feel like that they can even approach you. But the reality is I push. It's like, no, I'm here for you. And that's for the guys and the gals on the job and even outside the organization. The youth development programs, I was a big part of that in the past. And oh, what an amazing thing to be a part of. We're part of the youth fire academies. And just to see the growth of these young women in a 6 to 8 week program is just so motivating. So that's one piece of it. It's outside of the department, but internally, you know, we've got a big turnover within the next 2 years. We've got a major amount of people that are going to be leaving the LAFD. So it's really, talk about a succession plan. We better be leaning forward and be thinking about that. And we are, and that's the good news. But the mentorship is such an important piece so that people understand how to set themselves up for success, but to gain the experience that they need. It ultimately comes down to making good decisions.
All right, well, this is a perfect platform for you. So why should someone consider the LAFD if they are a young person looking toward a future?
Right, so the LAFD is really unique. We're one of the largest departments in the city, and I used to run our recruitment unit as a captain, and that was my spiel. It's like, okay, why come to the LAFD? I talk about the sky's the limit. We have so much to offer, you know, versus a smaller department. There's not a lot of room to grow. There's not a lot of different positions. If you have an interest in being a scuba diver, guess what? On the LAFD, you could be one of our divers. If you have a passion and you want to fly helicopters, guess what? We have a bunch of those. There's sky's the limit, even from all the different types of ranks that we have on this organization. The promotability within the department, every 2 years, if you're eligible, you can compete. It's a competition, don't get me wrong, but the ladder and the career ladder is amazing within our department. Because there's so many opportunities because we have so many positions.
I heard you tell a really poignant story about, you know, obviously it's the safety and the physical response to a fire, etc., but sitting with someone who has experienced something traumatic and just being with them. And I heard that you were telling a story about an elderly woman who had lost her husband.
Right, so yeah, if you're a firefighter, people always say, what's the hardest call you've ever been on? And they want to hear about the biggest, baddest brush fire you've ever been on, or the biggest, baddest, you know, structure fire that you've been on. And those are a lot, I mean, those are very challenging, both mentally and physically, but people are always surprised when I say the calls that really get me are the ones when you have the ability to connect with either the patient or a family member and really make a difference. And that may be holding an elderly woman's hand who just lost her husband or spouse of 60 years and connecting with her and spending a little extra time with her. And then those are the calls that stick with me. It's not the big fire that we might have gone on. We were on it for a couple hours and went back to the station and that was it. It was really about how we're able to connect with people, with the community of LA.
Well, if people want to get more information about their own safety or the potential of being somebody that provides the opportunity to help others, how can they get in touch and what should they look for?
The easiest way is just our website. It's LAFD.org. We've got a fantastic webpage. It's got the preparedness piece on there. It's got all of our different areas within the department, if they even from the recruiting side, with our hiring process, but that's where most of the information is. It's an easy way to get a hold of the fire department as well, and that would probably be where I'd push people to.
Renicia White, Jessica Famoso, and Kimberly Simonette truly care about the challenges facing young girls today. So they created the event conference, Pretty in Pink, to give girls the guidance, support, and acceptance they need. Well, it's no surprise that playing in a park is good for a young person's physical health, but there's a remarkable program that's part of LA Rec and Parks that's good for a young woman's emotional and mental health. It's called Pretty in Pink. So it's basically a conference.
Yes,
It's a conference.
Okay, so it's one day.
Yes.
When did you realize that this was something that you needed to support and actually help them with?
Well, after going to one of the conferences, I saw how large it was, and from that, I knew that there needed to be more sponsorship. I mean, they were really going out scrambling on their own, trying to get people to come in and actually assist with purchasing items for them. So as a department, we could get that support to get more funding for the program.
The girls were interested in some of the more serious topics and not necessarily just the goodie bag.
Yes. I know for me, one of the things that I heard a lot of girls talk about was self-esteem. And I would hear comments that they will make about themselves and they weren't positive, or they will hear comments at school and they'd be like, well, the whole school thinks I'm ugly. Or I heard girls talk about the color of their skin, or, the tint, like different things like that. So I'm like, self-esteem is like really important, and I think we definitely need to touch on that. And I think when we have those sessions and we have women that are of different ethnicities come and speak to them and tell them about their struggles, I think it empowers them and lets them know that like those faulty thoughts that I had are not true, because here is a woman standing in front of me who has done it, who's achieved, who's overcome.
It's hard enough to be a young woman in this world, but to actually be able to voice it. Were you surprised that the girls were willing to talk? Because sometimes it's difficult to express yourself when you're young and you're not really quite sure what you're thinking in your head. Were you surprised at what the girls said at these conferences?
I was and I wasn't. The thing that helped some of the girls is that they were able to interact with different girls from different communities. So then it was the sense of, oh, I'm not by myself. I'm hearing from other, girls from the Valley or from East LA or South LA, and they're seeing that they're basically having the same issues.
So what does a day look like? How does it play out?
It's a big day.
It's a big day.
It starts really early, and even the night before. But we always try to do a wow factor, so that's our thing.
Okay.
Where the girls walk into the room, it's like wow, and the whole goal is to make them feel special, and to set the program aside from anything else that they've experienced before. But we always try to have 5 sessions, and then we incorporate some like self-esteem, empowerment type sessions, but then we also add a physical session in there where it's like they're introduced to a new sport or activity. And then we have lunch, we have guest speakers, we have some type of entertainment, so maybe some music, in between like lunchtime, and then like that. So that's pretty much the whole day.
So from a, I don't want to say corporate, but from a department, how has it been received from LA Rec and Parks, and then even further up? Because obviously there's an enormous amount of participation with city leaders, but what has been the feedback in the offices?
They're very supportive of the program. I mean, one of our commissioners came out and actually did an opening for the girls. So to have her come out and actually recognize what was going on was really, really inspirational to have her there.
What do the speakers say to you after their experience? Because you have had this remarkable opportunity to bring some, preeminent people in, or people that could share some of their stories. So what do they say to you after the end of the day?
They love it. At this point, we get approached by people that want to speak. So we get approached like emails. I heard about your conference. Can I be part of it? So we get a lot of good feedback. Most of them end up staying the whole day, and their part is like in the morning, like at 9, and they end up staying until 4 because they feed off of it. They want to walk around. The girls will start asking questions because they start relating. So they'll stay the whole day, just enjoying the day.
It's an energy that you just have in the room, in the different rooms as things are taking place, and that's why those people that come in and speak, they want to be a part of that. And I think it even goes back into, especially when the women come out, their inner childhood. If they could have had something like that during their time, would have been great. And so they want to be a part of that.
Last year had to be a little different.
Right.
And how did that play out? And was it was a different experience, I'm sure,
Yes.
but what was the response and feedback you guys got from that?
Virtual Pretty in Pink, of course, ideal, we want to be in person, it's more personal, but given the circumstances, we decided we still want to do something for the girls. I was getting feedback from the girls prior to anything, and they were telling me about how they were like sad or like it was boring in the house. So I was like, these girls still need support, they still need something. So Jessica and I was like, well, let's go virtual, let's see how that is. This was our first time doing virtual, so we weren't quite sure.
It was the first time for everybody. You were not
Yeah,
alone.
it was like the technology part that I was just like, okay, let's go for it. So we decided to do that, and we was getting, girls involved and signed up for it. We had about 70, 80 girls that registered for the program. And so it was just different because you have to contact them differently. It's not like I'm in your face and I can just give you a flyer. It's more so like, I got to call you, I got to text you, I got to email you, got to get your parents to buy in, whereas before it was just like the kids are at the park, you like Pretty in Pink, sign up and come. So we had to go through that. So, like I said, when your heart is in it, we put the effort in it. Each session we did have about 50-something girls that participated, and so it was just good. I was grateful that we were able to do something for them. We did have technical difficulty, but everything else was like great, so no one paid attention to that, or it wasn't a big issue. But same platform, we had topics and we talked to the girls about anxiety, because a lot of that happened with the pandemic happening. So we did talk about anxiety and get the girls to understand the parts of their body that they were feeling anxiety, and then ways to cope with the anxiety.
And what anxiety is.
Yeah, so we went through all of that with the girls. They were really responsive, and we thought that too, like, it's gonna be hard to get them to talk, but we couldn't sometimes get them to stop talking. They were like interrupting us during our presentations, and was like, I had this time and my mom, and we was like, okay. So they were like really excited about it. So I think it went great for the first time.
Again, we noticed the need of the girls needing that space. They would even log in way before we were, and then they would start chatting amongst each other. So I'm like, they need it. They need the space, or because of the pandemic, they were feeling secluded from friends or from life, basically.
Right, that socialization that they were missing was finally, here's something where we can be in touch with our friends again.
You may not have realized the extent of the power of what you've done, because not just what's happening in the room on that day, but the ripple effect, them getting to know each other from different communities, them getting to understand that everybody may or may not have the same issues that they do, but also getting to know someone outside their comfort zone probably will change their mind. Have you thought about that too?
I think we hope for it. That's one of the things that I hope. I hope my community, let's say like South Park community, they're exposed to other lifestyle other than what they see in a community, which was one of our main focus for the urban, community girls, for them to see that there's more to life than what they see on their environment.
Are there other programs similar to this, or is this very unique to what's happening?
I would say this is unique to what's happening with females. Mm-hmm. We do have other teen programs where like teen summits that we get together, and so then you have that cross of the males and the females. But for just females, this is pretty much what we do.
Okay, so if somebody wants to learn more about this program, what's the easiest, best, and most direct way for them to find out?
I would say laparks.org. Just go to our website, and definitely they would contact us, and that way they would find out more.
And then I imagine there's some things beyond the website as well.
Right, so we have our Facebook page and our Instagram page, which is at Pretty in Pink Empowerment.
Tiny home communities are being built throughout LA. We talk with Councilmember Bob Blumenfield about his mission to continue to provide shelter to those experiencing homelessness in his district.
Tiny homes or cabin communities initiative, as you call it. How is the Sycamore cabin community progressing?
We've got 2 cabin communities now in my district, and they're both doing really well. We have one cabin community right behind my district office where we have about 52 cabins. That has been up and running since June, so relatively new, but it's full. A lot of folks are having their lives transformed. They're no longer on the street. They're living in these cabins. They're getting services, 3 meals a day, shower, restrooms, the whole 9 yards in terms of that. We've been working very closely with the community to make it really integrate in the community as much as possible. And it's not having a negative impact on the community as some people feared. And then we have a second cabin community, which we're calling Sunflower. The first one we call Sycamore. And that's in Tarzana, right off the Orange Line. And that one just opened up a couple of weeks ago. And so it's not full yet. They're onboarding folks slowly and deliberately, and in a way that they bring people in, they explain all the rules to them. It's a process, but it's a good process because that way folks understand the expectations about being in that cabin and they go in willingly. Here I am at cabin 76. This is where I'm spending the night tonight. Come on in.
I know you had the experience of actually spending, was it a night in one of the cabins?
Yes, yeah.
First-hand experience?
Yeah, no, I wanted to know, and Hope of the Valley offered this as they're the service operator. They put together a night before it officially opened for the clients. We all basically were able to spend the night there to get a sense of what that's really like. Obviously, it's not the same exact experience that someone is going to have when you've been living on the streets, because you know going in it's just one night. I can tell you it was a comfortable bed. It had air conditioning, heat, Wi-Fi. For someone who's living on the streets, it's transformative. The amenity that is most important to someone who's been on the street, it's not the showers or the meals, it's something very small. It's a lock. It's having a locking door so that you can sleep at night without fear of being rousted or a predator or someone coming by. And just that tiny little lock, the little piece of metal, makes all the difference in the world for someone. People describe their experience of sort of finally being able to rest. So folks can stop thinking about just how do I get through the day and how do I find a meal and how do I avoid being a victim, to, okay, I'm in a location, it's a stable environment, people are here to help. How do I move forward in my future? How do I get ultimately an apartment? How do I get my ID or my look for work or whatever it is that person needs to do, or if they're having struggles with addictions, how do I deal with those issues?
Yes, because you have counseling too, I read that, and also I think 24/7 security, so the security aspect is taken care of, and also mental health counseling and like you said, help finding jobs.
Yeah, each person who's in one of these cabins has a caseworker. And part of the condition of being in that cabin is that you're working toward your case. You are out of survival mode and you're into future mode. That's what keeps people in that cabin, is that they are working for their future. And it's not meant to be a forever home by any means. It's not designed to be. And in fact, by design, it's made rather sparse because it's meant to be a transition from someone who's been living on the street, somewhere that's comfortable but not so comfortable that they don't want to move on. The cabins themselves were designed by folks who were formerly homeless. There's a company that involved folks who were formerly homeless in the design. And there's been a lot of thought into how these communities, not only the cabins themselves are constructed, but how the community is put together. When you get someone out of survival mode, not only is that good for them as an individual, but that's really important for the surrounding community, because someone in survival mode is the kind of person who might break into your car. Not necessarily, I'm not saying that, but someone who's in survival mode is going through your dumpster. Many of the things we get complaints about are complaints about actions that are taken by someone who's in that survival mode. Just that act of getting that person off of the local street and into a place where their survival needs are taken care of and they can focus on the future is a game changer.
And even like their pets are taken care of. There's also room for pets to live there as well.
That's a great observation. One of the things that we found, and over time, some of the barriers to folks accepting shelter or accepting transitional or even permanent shelter has to do with their pets or a loved one. You know, a lot of times shelters are divided by gender, so people aren't willing to give up their family, which is understandable. And whether that family is a pet or a spouse or a loved one, these cabins, if they're a couple, they can share a cabin. If you have a pet, there is a dog run on site. You're allowed to have a pet. So it deals with some of those issues that have traditionally been barriers.
The streets cannot be the waiting room for permanent supportive housing. So these kinds of interim solutions help people transition from a life on the street. They need something like this to get them to that next step.
It's interesting because when we talk about homeless people, I think we tend to think about people living on the streets, but let's talk about people who are homeless and living in their cars.
The way our system traditionally works is that the services tend to go to the folks who have the most acute needs. And someone who's living in their cars typically has less acute needs than someone who is on the street because they've managed to keep it together, they still have a vehicle, they may have fallen into homelessness more recently. And so sadly, a lot of times the services are not available for those folks. So we've looked into things like safe parking. We've surveyed private and public lands for homeless interventions, and we've successfully been able to get several, but it's often very difficult to acquire the land at a decent price. So your go-to is often the public lands that are available, and the land behind my office is one that we had direct control over. So we were able to pioneer a safe parking program, and that's been a program ongoing for a couple years now. No real problems with it. You know, these are folks, many of whom have jobs. They're holding it together, but they need just a little bit of help. It's really the least we can do is give someone a parking space for the evening to, you know, lay their head in their car. I mean, it is really not much, but it is not much for the city or for the public to do for someone. But for oftentimes for that person who gets that spot, it's transformative. You're allowed to be there, you're on a list, you're not allowed to just drive up. You have to register and you're expected.
And there's security, I'm assuming, as well.
There's security on site, and there's a portable restroom on site. Little things make a big difference.
It's interesting that you talked about, you know, the people we forget because they don't have acute needs. And there's something that you've talked about in the past. You've talked about the missing middle regarding affordable housing. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, we have an affordability crisis. People are spending more and more of their income on rent, and rent is going higher, you know, at a much faster rate than income, and so people are being squeezed out at all levels, and it's teachers, firefighters, folks who, you know, work every day, you know, retail workers, all sorts of folks who are serving the community. You look at the rent now for an average, you know, studio. You can't afford it on a livable wage, let alone on a minimum wage, and so trying to figure out solutions that not only focus on how do we create subsidized affordable housing, but also how do we create or incentivize housing for that missing middle. You know, in my district, in the Warner Center, we were able to, I'd love to see inclusionary housing in the Warner Center. We haven't been able to get that yet, but we, on a sort of project basis, we were able to, in a big recent project with Westfield, able to strike a deal with them where they're doing 5% low-income housing and then 5% workforce housing, which is defined as an average 120%, so anywhere between 80% AMI to 150% AMI. It's a start. Ultimately, it's all about how do we improve the quality of life for people. You know, I like that there's a Hubert Humphrey quote I used to hang on. I had a big copy of it blown up. I used to hang it on my wall when I was the budget chair in Sacramento, and it says, "The moral test of government is how we treat those in the dawn of their life, the elderly, and in the shadows of life, the sick and disabled." It's a great quote, and I liked when I was the budget chair, particularly to have it front and center, because people would come in with all these requests and sort of they could see where I was coming from. But I think it's a general philosophy about what, you know, government is meant to serve all the people, but to really to look after those who have trouble looking after themselves.